start.
Okay. Hello, how are you? Nice to meet you. It's a pleasure for me to present this second section of our initiative. This initiative that we create, we start in the beginning of the pandemic scenario, and now with this second period of the scenario when the classroom and the educative system are starting, we have the honor to start this second period with one of the most important education voices around the world, the professor Gert Biesta. He is now in UK, and it's an honor for me, and of course my friend Ezequiel Passeron from the NGO Passeron Digital, and Raquel Miño, also doctor from the University of Barcelona, have this opportunity to talk with you and know what is your perspective, your opinion, your sensation about this strange, very weird or amazing, I don't know what is your opinion, moment that we are living the last 6 months. So, Professor Gert Biesta, thank you very much for accepting this invitation. And I would like to know what is your opinion about this last 6 months, especially in the educational context.
Yeah, that's a very big question, partly because this is a big thing that's happening, but also because I think everyone has an opinion about it. So it's in that sense, I also, wonder how big is it and what does it mean to have an opinion about it. I think that quite a lot has changed. And I've said a couple of times that this virus makes a lot visible. I think I find that very interesting. That suddenly all kind of things that we assumed were normal are no longer normal. Things that happened in education, the way people act in education. So it's, in that sense, it's an interesting interruption because interruptions, they challenge what we take for granted. And the other thing, as an educator, I would say it's, in my own work, I talk about this aspect of education as subjectification, where we are sort of called to come to ourselves in the world. And I find it a very subjectifying moment. So it really appeals to all of us to respond, maybe not immediately to have an opinion, because opinions, well, that's just language, but it asks something from many of us. So I find that interesting as well.
Professor, I want to ask you if you have some thoughts if this situation is going to be a before and an after for school education. What do you think about it?
I think, it is a moment where a lot has changed. The first change, I think, that I find striking is that it has changed quite a lot in the form of education. And I'm really excited about the German scholar, Klaus Prange, who actually says, if you want to understand education, don't start with theory, but start with looking at the form. And I find that a very interesting way to get into education. And you could say, what is special about the form of education? Very basically, you can say education is where we help each other to pay attention. And we have developed all kinds of forms, sitting together in a confined space, blocking out time, having text to read or curriculum. And you can say these are all forms that help us to focus attention in a particular way. And I think what is the difference between the before and the after is that some of these forms we have developed for helping each other to focus attention, like sitting together in a physical space, they are no longer available for now. That for me is quite a significant change. it doesn't mean that education is no longer possible, but it affects the form first and foremost.
Mm-hmm. Gert, it's very nice, this idea you have of what these emancipatory educational rhythms can give us. I mean, I read this article of yours saying that not going to school every day and having the internet to communicate with our students, it can give us some kind of emancipation with the rhythms that we have to be in school all the time. What kind of possibilities do you think this can give us, this kind of emancipation?
Yeah, so there are sort of people who say the best way to do school is to constantly be together. And you can say there is something special about that. One thing I, for example, like in my own teaching is what I call the soundscape of a classroom. Just the buzz and the acoustics and how voices mix. That's completely lost in all these Zoom meetings. There's a very different sound that really disturbs me, you could say. Also the difference between 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional. That for me is the real significant difference. So you may have read this little piece where I criticize this phrase of digital education because there's nothing digital we can experience. What we experience is different soundscape, 2D pictures. And then in terms of emancipation, you can say that an interesting thing about being together in a classroom or a school building or a lecture hall is that what can happen is you can call it good social control. So social control has a bit of a bad name, but you can also say when we are together, we sort of keep each other a bit, in control. We have a perception of how we are there together. This is the problem with Twitter, for example. There is no social control and people become very aggressive or insulting or crazy. But of course, the social control of being together can also be constraining, where you think there are things you cannot do. And maybe there is a bit of an emancipatory possibility where you say, well, when we are at home, where we are a bit of a distance, this whole question of what is my space, what is the space of the institution, what is the space of the teacher, what is the space of the fellow students, that becomes a different setup. And there I think we should also be optimistic. So I hear teachers who say, oh, it's really difficult to control my students when it's at a distance. But you can also see that students do not necessarily abuse that. It creates something else. And I think that's not all bad. So it's important to keep that in mind as well. Whether that is emancipatory, you cannot say that in advance, but at least we should highlight emancipatory possibilities there. It also does something with teachers. So the whole question of trust, I think, becomes a different one. When you're always together physically, trust works in a very particular way. And if it disappears, then you need to ask as teacher, can I no longer trust my students? Or is this suspicion I'm beginning to have, is that saying something about how I used to trust my students? Did I really trust them, or was I just trying to control them, and did I call it trust? So for me, that's also an interesting thing that happens there. And again, I would say there is something positive about that as well. At least it makes visible what you can say with difficult language, sort of the modalities of trust in education are.
A few months ago, we have a very interesting meeting with the Professor Boaventura de Souza, and he said that it's one of the most important thing that we need to believe that it's impossible to replace the face-to-face educator with the virtual educator is that the face-to-face educators is not only the that happen in the classes in the class. You know, it's also a lot of situations that happen.
Mm-hmm. I think his connection is not
Oh,
that
dear.
good today. He's lagged.
Okay.
Could be,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, Ezequiel, can you do the next question, and I will try to replay. You know?
Yeah, but I think that you were going to the point, Pablo, that education not only it's what happens in the classroom, but also to connect to the other things that happens in reality. And talking about the trust you were saying, Gert, previously, do you think that with this type of education of emergency, but for the future of education, what do you think about the trust of youth, but also of teachers? If this type of education we are having today has some sense or has some purpose, and if it is something important to have this sense of purpose of education, that maybe it was a crisis that was previous to the pandemic, right? How to connect schools and what we learn at schools, but not only in the class, but also the interest and the things that kids and youth has in life in a digital society as we are living now today.
Yes, these bigger questions around education and what it is and why we have it and where it's going, they have not disappeared. So the big tension between, is the school just, well, to put it a bit stark, a shop where you buy your education for your private benefit, or is the school a public institution, a public project where we as society try to do something? That is a big question that I think has been going on for a long time, and has been, yeah, the whole idea of the school as a public institution has been put under pressure a lot. And I think what's happening now, there is a risk that pressure and that, what is it, tension between the two views about the school is intensifying. One thing you can see is that, and again, that's not new. The people who have the money, who have the networks, who have the connection, they will be fine with their education because they will find other ways of organizing it for themselves or their children. So the whole question of inequality, in a sense, becomes visible in this moment as well. The statistics that, yeah, everyone knows, and I think it's really good that they are there in the open, that it matters hugely whether you have access to a computer or not, and that many don't have access to a computer. Well, there you can already begin to see this split between sort of private benefit and education as a public concern, and that's intensifying. I've read some pieces about privately funded schools attracting more students. So again, the people who have the money say, my child will get a better education there, which of course leaves the one who don't have the money, yeah, in a worse position.
I think that now I have a little bit good connection, I think. No? So in the same aspect that you are talking, I would like to know an overall opinion about the role of the public administration of the educative system in Europe as an institution, and especially their reaction with the pandemic. What is your opinion about this? Because in Spain, for example, is one of the most important debates that we have now, you know, So I don't know, what is your opinion? Do you think that this could be impossible to have a better reaction that they have?
That's a difficult question. So from the countries where I'm in touch with and see things happening, I see politicians struggling with the same things, practicalities of opening schools, pressures from different parts of society. In England, this very much stages the pressure between sort of the health and the economy. And in England, it looks like the economy is the stronger argument. In Scotland, at least in the discussion, it's different. It seems that the health of everyone is still the main argument, and the economy is a consequence that we need to carry, and all within limits, of course, of still very affluent societies. I think what strikes me most from what I can see is that I haven't seen many governments that do anything interesting. So they all seem to assume we know what the school is, we need to at some point go back to what it was, and there are good reasons for that. But I've never seen a spark where people say, well, this is the moment where we can either do something differently, or the other concern I also have in my own work is to think again about the priority. So I haven't really seen a shift in saying we should stop testing, we should stop competition, we should stop PISA. I see some developments that actually do the opposite, that say it's really good that we have PISA because at least we have a quick way to check whether all these countries are still performing. And that's really sad, because then, it shows that the real fundamental discussion about why do we educate, why have we got schools, that I don't see a lot of a shift there. And that's maybe the most remarkable, that I don't see politicians or governments that have a spark or deeper insight and say, let's reconsider what we have been doing.
I don't know, Raquel, if can I do a little bit question? It's special. It's a continue with your idea, but in Spain we saw the risk that, for example, when the educative system continue, the situation, for example, for the charter and private school was very different than the public school. Mm-hmm. So with Raquel and Ezequiel are very weird, for the consequence of this, in the not in the future, and the large future, immediately now, because and our perception, for example, in Spain was that the most typical charter and private school, they more or less continue with the process until the end, but the public school have a lot of important problems to continue with it. What is how can reconduce this situation and reduce the risk for in this month, in September, when again we will start the school, the classes?
Well, you can say the solution is to abolish all privately funded education. This
is the solution. The solution is only public education, no?
Yes, which doesn't solve everything, because within that you also have all the processes of the reproduction of social inequality. But you can say, again, this is what becomes much more visible as a result of this whole pandemic, that there are structural inequalities here. And that the people who have the money and the networks are far less affected by it. And you can say that begins to show actually the importance of the school in a very different way, because it shows that the school as a public provision precisely to counter all these structural inequalities is really important. But it's a tremendously difficult one, also because I think the whole question of the relationship between sort of publicly funded and privately funded education is very different in different countries and also comes out of different histories. So it's difficult to talk about that globally or pan-European. And you need to look at what are the dynamics in different countries. And I know the dynamics in the UK, where there is a top layer of privately funded schools, and that's mostly for the elites, and they are very good at taking care of themselves and not so much for the rest of the country. In the Netherlands, there is a very diversified system of education, but it's mostly publicly funded, and in that sense, it made a different educational culture.
Again.
Yeah, following your last ideas, Gert, I think most of us, or many of us, had this maybe idealistic hope that this situation could make us, this interruption you said before, could make us rethink economy, rethink care, rethink relationships, rethink education. We even thought, for example, I stopped buying clothes, and I thought, oh, this could be an opportunity, to put in question the capitalism. Or, for example, in schools, it has been said that we can try to not just learn in schools, but with other institutions around, with the community, with families. These are very nice ideas, but at the end, as you said, I'm not that sure that this is happening, or this can be an opportunity for transformation. If you could think about or share your thoughts about this society the school needs now, these changes in the social, economical, educational model, would you have some ideas if we now dream, even if this doesn't happen?
Yeah, so I share your hopes. I think, in our countries, it feels a bit like at least the first impact of the pandemic is a bit over. In other countries, that's definitely not the case. And in the middle of it, it felt like some things were fundamentally shifting, people's relationships, people's priorities. And then you see how strong the pull back to something else is. I think what became visible for me as well, of course we knew it, but still, how interconnected the economy is. And that on the one hand, there is a lot wrong with the economy and our modes of consumption, but you also see that, when we stop buying, when we stop consuming, it means people's jobs. So you become more aware, you can say, of those connections. To change those connections is a much longer term project that has been going on for decades. Ecological justice, environmental justice. And I think it's probably too optimistic even to think that something like a pandemic would begin to change all that quickly. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be hopeful. I think it's important to keep a memory of what is going on. Comes back to a core educational issue, this whole question of attention. Can we keep up collectively an attention to what we have experienced, or will we forget that very quickly? I wrote a little other piece in response to all this as well, in which I asked the question whether education is anesthetic, whether it numbs us, whether it makes us forget, or whether it's aesthetic, and aesthetic not in the sense of arty, but in the sense of what is visible, what is perceivable, what remains in our attention. And for me, that's an important educational question that you can also bring into the domain of politics and say, have we got politics where we are helping each other to remain aware of what's happening in front of our eyes? Or are all the processes and mechanisms that numb us and that work sort of anesthetically, are they coming back in again? For me, that's, you can say, an educational way to look at society and politics as well.
And Gert, listening to you, when you talk about the government and the state's role and the importance of continuing measuring knowledge, we have a great example in Chile, you know, that's the way of giving money from the states and also controlling the schools and teachers and to measure the results of students. Do you think it's possible in an educational debate to talk a little bit and reevaluate the high price the evaluation has as, let's say, as a scientific way of measuring knowledge? I mean, we are living in digital society where likes, clicks, I don't know, index publications, that tends to be the most important thing. So I was thinking when I was listening to you that maybe a re-evaluation type of education and I don't know, how can we put the knowledge as an adventure, right? If we only pay attention about evaluation. I think it's something, I don't know, subversive to talk about education as an adventure, right? We are only thinking about evaluation. Do you think we can struggle to discuss these things in the educational debates, or it's impossible?
No, it's possible, and we should keep doing it. I read a lovely piece by chance written in 1964. I was reading an old book, and the author there says that the big question is whether we think that a school is a factory or that a school is a temple. Right. And I found those, two wonderful images, factory and temple. And it's interesting that already in the early 60s, people were struggling with that. And there is this constant push to make the school into a factory. Not always out of bad intention. So I always want to acknowledge the fact that all this measurement also exposes a lot of inequalities, exposes where things go wrong, exposes who benefit and who don't benefit. That's important, but then the solution cannot be more measurement, because that just pushes the system in the wrong direction, I think. So there are, I think, really fundamental questions that we need to continue to ask. One thing that was interesting, and probably that happened in many countries, when exams got stopped, there was quite a lot of panic. And here in the UK, there have been all kinds of problems with giving students exam scores and the algorithms that were used in doing that. But very few people actually ask this more fundamental question: what are we actually worried about? Are we worrying that within 6 months the whole country will come to a halt because we are not able to have very precise and measured exam results? And of course, that won't happen. So my concern with a lot of the measurement is that it creates a kind of pseudo-reality that keeps all kinds of people happy and that keeps all kinds of people busy, but it misses the real point. And you can say the opportunity with this big interruption in exam systems is to say, well, how does this actually matter? What is really at stake? But there were only very few people who said, let's relax about it. I didn't hear anyone, and at some point I was tempted to send a letter to the newspaper and say, let's just give all students a pass grade, or let's give them all the highest grade. Let's all say you have succeeded this year, and it's up to you to earn this success in the future. That's a very different way to even, to think about exams anyway. It's a much more educational way to say you all get the highest grade at the start of the year, and then you say, and now you have to work hard to earn that grade. That could have been the gesture as well. But yeah, I haven't seen a lot. So in your question, you already answered your own question, and I'm just endorsing it by saying this is what we need to keep into the conversation as well. The school as a temple, I find that a really interesting image.
Yeah, that's cool.
There are different visions about this scenario, optimism, negative. Some people say that this is the opportunity to change everything. Others say this is the opportunity to have a new capitalism and a new stronger capitalism also. What is your opinion about it? Do you think that, I don't know if you are optimist or negative in general, and especially in this period, but do you think that now we can build a new school outside the capitalist, or do you think that this is impossible and the risk is worse than this?
Yeah. So I would say I'm professionally an optimist, because as an educator, you have to believe in a future that's different from where things are now. If you don't have that belief, then you should choose a different job. So personally, I'm probably a bit more on the pessimistic side of what's possible, but I think this is our job as educators, never to say what we see now in front of us is how it will be forever. That's not how you approach a student. After that, one thing that really upsets me, it happened very early on already, that suddenly in the newspapers, I think this was late March in the UK, there were page big advertisements from Google Education. So they immediately stepped into that market, you could say, by saying, we are here and we can solve it all for you. Yesterday I was on LinkedIn and I got an advert from Pearson who said the case for online education, online learning, they say, of course, has definitely been proven now. So I clicked and said, I don't want to see this ever again. This is worse than the worst porn you can get on your computer. But these are some of the forces. So there are big companies and they've been pushing for a long time to say, yeah, we can take over education, we can do it online, we can do it more cheaply, and so on. All these seductive things, like if it's cheaper, we should go for it. Public education is expensive, so the whole question is not where can we cut money, but the question is, what are our priorities? Where do we want to spend money? So if you then ask this biggest question, can we envisage education outside of global capitalism, or is it just completely caught up with it? Part, I would say, is completely caught up with it. But here I think I am an optimist, that I think when people come together, there is always the spark and the possibility of something else. So when we take a macro view or a view at the level of institutions, it often looks extremely regulated. But I think luckily there are still many opportunities to be in small spaces, in classrooms or outside, and have basically subversive conversation. Now, if that becomes eroded, and there I'm worried about technology, I'm worried about the online things that can control much more than you can say the proximity of a classroom. That will be a worry. But I would look there at the level of what's possible in practice. Knowing that there are big economic interests from all kind of directions.
In these terms, how important do you think digital critical literacy is important in schools like now? So, because these messages that appear to you from Google, or I just showed my colleagues the other day, I received a message from a private company of health saying that I should stop being in public health because this is not enough. And I was just so mad that I sent a message saying, please don't send me this again. And don't send to people these kind of messages. I mean, I was so mad. But so kids and young people and also old people, everybody, but now speaking about school, you're also receiving this impact and these messages all the time. So how important is digital critical literacy and critical literacy in general?
I think it's really important. Maybe the question is how we call it. Because probably also literacy and critical literacy, that becomes very easily sort of incorporated into something else. But you can say to know how the technology works, that's a really important question. It has always been an important question. To know how book printing works, to know how publishing works, to know how all that constantly tries to create asymmetries and does that for good reasons, but at the same time it can also turn into its opposite. I think that's a really important discussion to have. And if you want to call that critical literacy or critical digital literacy, that's fine. For me, it comes back to the question of aesthetics and anesthetics, and the question of attention and distraction. And that goes to the heart of education. How can we keep paying attention? And maybe that becomes more difficult when all the stuff we work with looks much more glamorous and more slick. Then it's harder work to figure out the politics of the technology than sort of the books I saw in the library when I was a child, where you had this stamp from the Catholic Church saying nihil obstat, we don't object to this book. That's also digital literacy to spot that, or critical literacy to spot that, but that's a bit more in your face, you could say. But the challenge remains the same.
Yeah, I will add, Gert, that it's really a tough job to teachers in general. To this thing that you say about attention, it's really quite complicated. We live all our days with our mobile devices and the computers, and all the products and services are very attractive, and it's more and more complicated to get attention about kids. I also think, like you, that the educational system in general has to have an answer or a strategy. Let's call it digital literacy. But I think that the education itself doesn't have all the answers for these struggles, right? Do you know any state or any government, and also if you think that any government has the power in order to create some sort of legislation in order to force these digital tech companies in order to not only produce new systems or new designs or new products, not only for winning money, but also to public interest, right? Do you know any case, or do you think it's possible?
Yeah, do you think it is possible? I think that is the question now.
Yeah.
No, it's a good question. I don't think I know any cases of where governments go straight to that particular problem. I do know that that many governments, at least, well, in this part of the world, have not become entirely cynical about education. So many governments are in a difficult position with this whole pressure of league tables and international competition. When you look at the discussions happening within countries, I don't see many governments that say it's just about scoring high in PISA. There are broader notions of citizenship. I think the sustainability agenda is moving into the educational imagination as well. There are things that you simply, you can say, cannot not talk about when you talk about national education systems. So there I'm optimistic. I think there are still at policy and political level pretty good discussions about the broader remit of education. What is difficult also for politicians is this global and commercial playing field that surrounds it. And there you need to be pretty awake and in a sense a bit courageous to keep asking the good questions there as well. I think there is a job for us as academics to at least generate some of those questions and help politicians to see that you can ask a different question or go in a different direction. So that's important work as well. I know my work is a lot in theory, but I think their theory can be quite significant in adding language, changing language, turning around questions. I really like this flip between what kind of school does society need and what kind of society does the school actually need. And when you talk to politicians about that, some suddenly say, hey, that's a good way to talk about this whole setup.
Two last questions. The first one is really two questions, but it's a mix. It's about the research. And, we are together in the university with the focus on the education, but especially in the education and relation, especially in the educational research. Do you think what is there to go out and inquire today? What do we need to find out in this moment after or in the middle of the pandemic? And the second little bit question is, what is your message for the academic community, especially for the teachers in the school, in this new beginning when the classes around the world, especially in Europe and the North, are starting this week or next week? What is your message for them? Because they don't feel sure with each stuff that they will do in the next week. So what is your message for them?
Okay, I'll try to speak to both questions. The first about research, I'm a bit worried because I see too many, initiatives, funding opportunities, journal special issues that all ask this question: what's the impact of COVID-19 on this and that in education, on student learning, on motivation, on well-being, and so on? And I simply think, A, it's too soon, because that's a very difficult question. What's the impact of these things? And B, it's too much. So it's almost a reflex that suddenly everyone thinks that they need to investigate what the impact of this is on education. So my first response there would be to say we need less of all that kind of sort of busy research, sending out questionnaires all over the world and collecting data and whatever. I generally think there is too much research. So we should do a little less. And And what is most important is not whether you can collect massive data, but whether you have good questions. So I would encourage the academic community to limit this reflex of saying we already know what the question is and let's go out and get the data, and actually see what are the questions that we should be asking here. So that's one worry I have, that I see also in the places where I work, that they say, we need new research agendas that all only have this COVID-19 question. There is extra money going there. Or I've already, as journal editor, seen 8 people who propose a special issue on COVID-19 and education. So that, I think that's too much, and I would just quickly say, let's first figure out what the questions are we should be asking. That's the far more difficult work, actually. And then about teachers who, go back to their classrooms at the start of a new school year. There's a lot to say, so I'm just thinking in my head what would be the most important thing to say. Probably I would say, don't forget what you are able to do. So again, a thing that really worries me is all this discourse that says, oh, all teachers lack digital skills and we need to upskill them. That defines teachers as lacking something. And I don't think that we should start from there. The beauty about teaching is that it's, you can say, an inventive art, an improvisational art. What we do as teachers is constantly make education in always new situations. Good teachers possess that art, and they should not be too disoriented by this new situation. You can also say it's really exciting to see how much of my own art I haven't yet discovered, but now I have an opportunity to bring that out. So I want to do the opposite of saying teachers lack an awful lot. This is an opportunity to discover that you have even more and can do more than that you may have been aware of. So I would start from there. I wrote this little book last year called Obstinate Education, where I say society needs to become a bit more patient about education, and teachers need to become more obstinate. They need to collectively encourage each other to be self-confident about the work we can do, and resist all these crisis talks that say, oh, you lack skills, you're unable to deal with it. And that's probably the message I would give.
Well, Gert, I don't know if my colleagues have some other questions, but I just wanted to thank Gert some things, but if you want to go with the last question, do you have so many?
No, I would like to thank you, Gert, very much for the last phrase you said, and also for the article you share us, that then we will share it to the community that especially talks about education as an art. I think I was wondering to read something optimistic, but with fundamental, let's say, quite, I don't know. We have been reading so much, and as you said, the research is, it's so complicated nowadays with a lot of things to do that just reading something that maybe could be seen as basic, but I think that it's basic and fundamental. So I will especially and personally thank you for this insightful talk and interview, and for your time.
Okay, you're welcome. Thanks very much also for your questions.
Sure, Gert, I just wanted to add to what Ezequiel said, that we're just about to start teaching in a couple of weeks. And actually, I've been feeling this at Ezequiel, and hopefully, well, virtually, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And we've been receiving a lot of messages from the media and also from teachers that victimize, that you, at the end, you feel like you don't know how it's going to be, you feel so insecure. And it has been really nice to read and listen to this definition of the art of teaching as engaging with situation we have not encountered before, and seeing the idea of going back to classes as an opportunity and as an adventure, as Ezequiel said. So I think your optimism will help us all to go back to classes in all the institutions with a lot of hope now. We will try.
Yes. Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Gert. Pablo, if you want to add something.
You are mute.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much for everything and keep in touch.
Yes, at some point I hope to see you in 3D rather than 2D. This was lovely. Okay.
Great.
Good.
Bye, Gert.